Hi everyone, in this video I'll be talking about how to name files as well as version control and when to put numbers at the beginning of your file and when to print a PDF. So I've created a demo folder and I'm going to go into it. And in this demo folder I'm going to pretend that we have parts of the project that we're working on. I've labeled it as project 1, 2, 3, or 4. You could label it as section something with a name. A few things to discuss when naming. It is best to have a name that is short and concise but descriptive. So you generally want characters below a number of characters below 25. You don't want to have a super long name because then the text in the folder can get rather cumbersome and confusing to find. You don't want it so short that it's not descriptive enough. The other thing you might want to talk about with your team is how to format dates. Sometimes you'll see dates that are year, month, day, and sometimes the days on the month can be switched. So it'd be year, then days, then months. To me, it makes more sense to go year, month, day rather than year, day, month because then you're going by decreasing time periods. Something to discuss with your team so that everyone is on the same page. Another thing I'd like to note is sometimes when naming a folder, you don't want spaces and you don't want special characters such as dashes or ampersands because sometimes you forget where the dashes and the ampersands go. Sometimes you can't remember if it's a backslash or a forward slash, and sometimes you can't find the characters on your keyboard. So if you're going to name any folders, make sure that it makes sense to have either have spaces that make sense where it's appropriate or else don't have spaces at all. And I don't recommend any funky characters because that can get pretty confusing. So let's go into Project 4 and I'm going to talk about version control. Now, in Project 4, I have these subcategories. The first category was Project 4. The second, this is a subfolder, so part 1, 2, and 3. So I'll go into part 1 to discuss version control. In here, we have, let's say, 3 documents. So I've labeled them creatively document 1, 2, and 3. V4 means version 4, V2 means version 2. In this example, there's 4 versions so far of document 1, and if I'm going to click into this old folder that I've created, this means the old versions that we're no longer using. So if I click into here, I should see older versions of document 1, 2, and 3. So here, I have older versions. So version 1, 2, and 3 of document 1 is no longer up to date. We as a team are going to just work on version 4. So now let's say that I want to work on version 4. I'm going to open up version 4. Before I do anything, I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it as version 5. And let's say this is update number 2. That's my edit. So it's saved. I'm going to close this off. And I'm going to go back into my folder and I see, hey, there's my version 5. That's the most up to date. Just take version 4 and drag it into here. And then it's up to date. Everyone knows that these documents that are outside of the old folder is what we're currently working on. Let's say I don't like my edit in version 5. I want to go back into version 4 and I want to do something in there. So my number 2 is gone. The new edits are gone. I'm going to then save this. Before I do anything else, I'm going to save this as version 6 because there's already a version 4, there's already a version 5, and even though I'm editing 4, it will be the most up-to-date work as version 6. So I'm going to save that and I'll say update again, something, whatever my edit is. And I'm going to save it and then exit out of Microsoft Word. I'm going to go back into my folder and hey, my version 6 is here, but it's under the old folder. It's inside there. I'm going to cut it and then I'll paste it outside. And then I'm going to take my version 5 and I'm going to drag it into old. So at the very end, before I close this window, it's always going to be the most up-to-date document that is outside of the old folder. And this is something that I recommend that people use, a system that is easy and it's clean, and then the old folder is just sort of like a Dropbox for everything that's updated. So let's go into part 2. In this part, I'm going to talk about when you should put a number in front of your name. So when you need to sequence something, or when a document has an order that needs to be followed, that's when I would recommend putting a number before the name of your folder, of your file. And the reason why that is because when things get mumbled and jumbled and edits are coming in and you have different documents that you're adding, you can always hit this name tab and then it'll sort the sections in order for you. Now, in this example, I'm going to talk about, let's say, editing the section 2 of this part. So I know this is section 2 because it has 2 in front of it, and I'm going to edit it. Before I edit anything, I'm going to then save a copy as version 6. Now my section number doesn't change, but my version number does. So your section number should never change. So I'm going to say edit, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to exit out of it. I'm going to go back into the folder, and then suddenly version 6 is here. I'm going to throw version 5 into old. Now, something that we discussed best practice of naming, what you can do if this looks too mumble jumbled up for you, and it's what I do personally, even though it's not technically best practice, is I like to have a space and a dash and another space. So that way I know that the number isn't an error, it's part of the section. But again, this is something you and your team can discuss if that's how you want to name this. So now I'm going to discuss part 3. This will be discussing when to print your draft as a PDF. Once you're done with finalizing your draft, you might want to consider printing it as a PDF. Usually your final draft will have old versions. Let's go into the old folder to see how many versions it has. So here we have the documents in version 1 and version 2. So this is technically version 3. If it's a final draft, you can save it as V3, but I like to save it as just final draft. That way, no changes will be made. There won't be questions of whether V3 is the final one or if the final one is V4, all of that. Just save it as final draft if you know for sure that you don't want to edit it anymore. We're going to open the document up in our word processor. This is just some text. And then because if someone opens a document in Microsoft Word, different versions of Microsoft Word can actually change the formatting of the document. So that is why I recommend printing it as a PDF so that you can email it to other people, you can save it on to different drives, and the formatting does not change. So there's a couple ways to do that, and I'm sure many of us know how to do this, but I'll just go over it with you. If you hit Control P, this will actually take you to the printer screen. Here, there's Adobe PDF, and then there's also Microsoft Print to PDF. I have found that Microsoft Print to PDF is actually a little bit better in terms of causing errors. Sometimes if you use Adobe PDF, it can create symbols and wingdings that you don't want in your document. But again, if you found that worked for you, feel free to go ahead. But I found that especially on Excel, Microsoft Print to PDF is better. I'm going to click this. I'm going to print. And then I'm going to find, to make sure that this is the right path that I want to print on, it is, and some document final draft. I'm going to delete the docs right here, and now it has been saved. And then I always double check to make sure that my PDF looks right and is saved in the right space. So I'm going to show you how to print it as a PDF in a different way. I'm going to delete this just for an example. I'll go back into my final draft. I'm going to File, Save a Copy, and save it as a PDF. And save. And then again, I go back in to make sure the final draft is saved. Perfect. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you need any help or have any questions, please email me. Have a good day.